Welcome, everyone. And while these repetitive acts of brutality often leave us at a loss for words, it is our responsibility not to stay silent. Um, but what do we say to our children in moments like this? It's the questions we're attempting to ask and answer tonight. How do we help them understand the role racism plays in our society? And how do we help them process the things they experience, they hear, or see? We wanted to do our small part and take an aim at these issues with the conversation directed towards parents and caregivers. So we asked some of our community leaders and our community partners to join us in a conversation on race relations in our society and talk about how we help our young people respond and be advocates for equality in their own way. Before we get started, Tabitha, if you don't mind pulling up that first slide, I'd like to just share some ground rules that we agreed upon for this conversation. Let's all be mindful that kids may be watching, so let's use appropriate language. These discussions can be intense and bring up powerful emotions. Let's agree to no offensive comments. We're not here to invalidate anyone's story, so let's be respectful of each other's experiences. And the goal is to encourage conversations with our kids as well as with each other. So understanding that we are not experts, we're just simply offering our opinion. I would like to encourage all the viewers to share their thoughts and submit their questions in the chat box, and we'll try to incorporate them in the conversation if we have time. I am grateful for all the panelists and the participants tonight that were brave enough to join. So I would like to introduce them all. Lawrence Nathaniel, who is a community leader and social activist who actually led the I Can't Breathe demonstration in Columbia. Abby Cobb is a leading social worker for Richland 2 School District 2, and Brandon Graham is the president and CEO of Growing Homes Southeast. To start the discussion, understanding that we all felt that it was appropriate to have these conversations on race relations in our communities right now. And as tough as it may be to actually try to address some historical issues, if you all don't mind, Brennan, I'll start with you, just answering the question of what motivated you to be a part of this discussion, and why do you feel like it was important for us to have discussion on race in our society?
Well, Andre, first of all, I just want to thank you all for letting me be a part of this discussion. I was honored when I got the call to be on this panel. As a Black man here in South Carolina, as a Black man who serves in a prominent role in an organization as the president and CEO of an agency that's charged with helping young people, and as a Black man who is the father of two young Black men, Black boys, I think this is just critical for us to make sure our children understand our world, understand racism, understand diversity, understand respect for mankind. This is bigger than just I'm being treated differently or I'm not, but it's sometimes that unknown or unspoken thing that just seems like, well, that's how things are in the South, or that's just how it was. When I was growing up, I experienced a lot of things that I didn't realize were racism. What I thought was that's just how it is. My parents had conversations with me about things that are going on. I was laughing with my children not too long ago. Always keep $1 in your pocket because people don't look at you and assume you're stealing something if you're walking in the store. Those little lessons that I learned, and I didn't know then that it was because of the way I looked. As I fast forwarded my life, and I had my child, my oldest son, when he was 6 years old, he came home and talked to us about how his teacher was treating him differently in class, and he just believed it was because of the way he looked, because of the color of his skin. It was him and the other young black boys in the class who were being treated differently. And he didn't understand that. And for me, it was hard to have a conversation with him because, you always want to take the high road and give folks the benefit of the doubt and say, well, maybe that's not it. But when a 6-year-old looks at you and says, no, it's because I'm black. She gave me different math work because she didn't think I could do it. And she even said so. She treated me differently in class because of the way I looked. And I could tell because she didn't treat the other kids that way. That's a hard thing to experience as a parent. It's a hard thing to understand and to talk to your children about as a parent. And so, it was tough for me. But I understand that in this forum, we're here to help parents understand how to have these conversations with their children and recognize that those conversations are going to be different in every household. And so being on this panel for me, as I said, is an honor. It gives me an opportunity to talk about some of the experiences that I've had, but then also maybe shed a little light on some things that folks don't want to talk about right now in our community, but we have to. It's absolutely critical for us to talk about these things right now.
Well, I'm grateful that you chose to be a part of the discussion. So thank you for being here. Abby, I pose the same question to you. What was your motivation to be a part of this discussion, and why do you think it is important for us to discuss racism in our society?
Yeah, thanks, Andre. I'd like to first start with the same way. I'm extremely humbled and honored to be asked to be a part of tonight. And I'll admit I'm a little nervous. I usually don't have a problem doing public speaking, and tonight has had me nervous. And so I've been having lots of conversations with my colleagues and my friends to help me prepare for tonight. So again, thank you to United Way for hosting this. This is such an important conversation for us to have. As Andre stated, I'm the lead social worker in Richland School District 2, and I have the privilege of serving as a school social worker in the community, and specifically in Richland School District 2. Served as a school social worker since 2007. And I will brag a little bit, but I have amazing staff, amazing social workers who work every day to try to change lives. I feel very fortunate to work where I work, to work with amazing staff, amazing teachers, administrators, district office staff who really look out for the best interest of kids. And people may not know that school social workers aren't mandated positions. And so if there are school social workers in districts, that's because the school board has decided that that's a goal for them. And so I'm thankful for our board for continuing to support the role of school social workers, because it is an essential component to the piece of ensuring that our kids are educated. I also feel like because of my role, I do a lot of community outreach for a lot of different reasons, whether it's food insecurity needs or homelessness or just you name it. And we try to find a connection for it in the community. And what I am always amazed at is this community. When I put a need out there, somebody steps up. And that's an amazing feeling to know that not only do I work, but I live in a community that really cares about its people. And I just get humbled by it all the time. And I'm just so thankful for it. And being a social worker, the foundation of a social worker, the foundation of our education is understanding that oppressive systems function and are alive and well in our country. That's the foundation, that's the core of what we believe and what we strive to do as social workers in general, is to try to break that chain, break that barrier, address that barrier of that cycle of just systemic oppression. And so tonight I'm here as a school social worker, but my personal beliefs are completely aligned with my professional beliefs. And I can't imagine not having this conversation. I literally have had experiences where I've been in meetings or I've had discussions and I said, why aren't we talking about this? How can we talk about anything but this right now? The impact of racism is ever present in our community. I'm really thankful for the protests that were going on, as I think it did such an amazing job of really spotlighting and highlighting the needs of our community and our country. I'm so thankful for that. And I think we really have to just be open and honest. Let's let's put it out there on the table of where we are and what systems and institutions we have in our country right now. Let's talk about it and let's figure out how we can move forward from here. And as a white woman, it's extremely important for me to, one, acknowledge my privilege. I think that that's an essential component of having conversations, is just talking about my privilege. And I have experienced from other white people that maybe there is some hesitancy to acknowledge their privilege, some defensiveness. And I think maybe sometimes people feel it might take away from their accomplishments, that what they've achieved in life wouldn't mean as much as it does if they acknowledge that there was some privilege. And I just want to put it out there that my experience is the complete opposite. Acknowledging my privilege has enhanced my life in so many ways. It has deepened my connections with people. It has helped me understand the world better from other perspectives. And it's just helped me grow to be more empathetic as a person. And so I'm really excited about being here tonight. I appreciate everybody. I appreciate this panel. It's an honor to be here. And I'm just excited about us continuing to move forward.
And thank you as well, Abby. I will say your initial comments when we first talked about having this community conversation inspired me to want to be a part of it. So I would like to just thank you for being here. Obviously, being the only white person on the panel, I hope it's not awkward for you. Very brave of you to take that position. 3 Black men on camera right now, and just you. So just know you're not.
It's an
honor. Lawrence, question to you, man. What motivated you to be here tonight?
Yeah, well, first I want to say thank you to the United Way, especially to everyone who has been working so hard to make this discussion happen. What inspired me to be here is that I have a voice as a young person, and I have a story to tell also. The story aligns with so many young people across this state. I grew up as a homeless youth, experienced racism, experienced just experienced the worst of the worst from my experience. One thing I do understand now is that growing up and not having the mother have that conversation about racism in the household, it kind of put a wall in a way, especially as a Black man in the community. It put a wall in the way to the sense of I really didn't know how to move. I was raised in a majority white community, starting off first. My grandmother, she was a housekeeper when we first moved to Bamberg, South Carolina. So we really didn't have that racial discussion. It was pretty much normal to me. And I think that if we have, it would have helped. It would help clear a lot of mistakes that a lot of young people make in their lives growing up. So I want to be a part of the discussion today to make sure that we can talk to those parents and help those kids understand why is it so important to talk about racism and why is it so talk about being around different cultures, because we don't want to be stuck in a crayon box where there's just one color inside of it. We want to be a place where it's diversity that offers many cultures and many opinions, because that's how we grow as human beings. We grow with opinions and we grow with different cultures and meeting different people. And if we don't have that understanding and that conversation before we step out the door, then we get lost in our way and we don't have a roadmap to that. So I'm very interested in tonight's discussion about how we can talk to the families and to the young people out there today about how we can change our system.
And thank you as well for being a part. Thank you all for sharing stories. Brennan, first question to you. How should we be discussing racism with our younger kids who may be experiencing it for the first time, and how can we help them process their experiences or their emotions?
I think we have to be as open as possible and as honest as possible. You know, as I mentioned, this is kind of like the elephant in the room. People recognize or know that there is racism there, and what we've done is work to avoid it. In many cases, it's just really uncomfortable. Even when just talking about race in general, you know, if you're describing someone, it's, you know, he's got dark skin, he's got dark eyes, and black hair. Well, he's a black man, and it's okay to say that because we're different. We look different. Our people are different. And so when we're talking to our children, when they experience something like that for the first time, as I mentioned with my son, I didn't know what to say. I thought, wow, is he too young to have this conversation? But if he's already experiencing it, then I might be too late. And so you have to regularly have these conversations. You have to regularly acknowledge that they may look different, but you don't treat them differently because of the way they look. And the funny thing is, children play with everybody. They're not looking saying, well, I don't want to play with this white kid. I don't want to play with this black kid. I don't want to play with this kid who just doesn't look like me. They see a kid and they want to play. And so over time, our actions and our words and our inaction teaches kids to see the difference, and our actions help them understand how to respond to the difference. And so I think it's just really important for us to be as open as possible and honest with our children about, we don't know the answer. It's different now from the way it was when we were growing up. As I said, things for me were, well, that's just how it is, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And so have the conversations and ask the children, well, what do you think? With my son, when he was younger, I asked him that. I asked him again today because I thought about it and I wanted to mention that today. And I asked him how he felt about it. And he still remembered it. He remembered it like it was yesterday. And so that impacted his life. He's 11 years old now, and it has really impacted his life, and it's changed the way he's looked at people. But we have to make sure that when we're teaching, we're not inadvertently teaching racism. We're teaching that people are different, and there are people who will treat you differently. And your role as a human is to identify those things and make a decision on how you want to respond. Either you address it, maybe you can ignore it, you can walk away, or you can do something on a global scale to really make a change. But giving the children the opportunity to understand how they can respond in their own personal ways.
I appreciate that response, Brennan, and understanding that, even for all of us, it's okay not to have the answers. It's okay not to know. We'd like to take the time out, Tabitha, if you don't mind pulling up the second slide, just to share a couple of tips with our parents on how to have the conversation, or at least start the conversation of race with their kids. Recognizing that kids will start to know and understand the physical differences at an early age. It's okay to acknowledge that the racial differences do exist and that bias do exist. So start that conversation early. Do not shut down if your kids bring up race. Help them navigate their own curiosity. Silence is not an option. Kids have their own thoughts on favoritism and unfairness. Ask your kids directly how they feel. Kids will also mimic our behaviors. Model what you want, how you want your kids to respond to people that look differently from them, and be aware of your own biases. And stimulate your kids with racially diverse books and other forms of media where they may be learning about racism, and build a positive awareness around diversity. And encourage your kids to challenge stereotypes and discrimination with kindness and compassion. Teach them how to be allies for equality. Abby, next question to you. What is more age-appropriate conversation we should be having with our older kids, middle school age kids, our teenage kids, regarding racial equality?
Okay, thanks. Well, first, I think that all of those tips still apply to the adolescent age, the middle and the high school age. And I think it's important for us when we start talking about having conversations and with middle school and high school age children is to really understand their development at that time and really put into context how many influences they are receiving from all over the place. They themselves are trying to figure out who they are, what they believe in, who they believe in, what's truth, what's not truth. They're getting information from all different places. And so I think that it's important for us to one, really ensure that we recognize where they're getting their information from and how often they're getting it and what type of information that is. And understanding that social media is probably their most influential environment that they're in. I think I'm even naive, I think sometimes to how much information or how much they're being exposed to. Kids might not always be talking about race and racism, but they are constantly seeing videos. They are constantly seeing stories or whatever the case may be, where racism is at the center of it. And so I think that that's, again, a really important thing that we need to take into context when we're talking with our adolescents. I had a similar situation with my son, and I think sometimes even I take things for granted. As a child of a social worker, he's had experiences of a lot of things, and he probably would roll his eyes at this. But I think even sometimes as parents, I don't know, kind of like how Brennan said, he wasn't even sure, are they ready for it, or should we have this conversation? And maybe I'm the only one, but I think sometimes we assume that our kids are going to take on our beliefs. They're going to take on our values and so much of that. And so I think it's important for us to, one, know that that's not a given, but two, also understanding that there are just so many influences. But to piggyback off of that, I do want to start with understanding that we as parents, I am a parent, we as parents are building the foundation for our children and how they understand the context of racism. And we think of, as a house, that the house is built upon a foundation. And if we want our children to function in this world and be anti-racist, we want them to be able to have conversations. We want them to be able to be an ally. We are their foundation, and they're going to take that foundation with them everywhere they go. And in some circumstances, that foundation is going to teach them what not to do. Some of us as adults, we have experienced that. Our foundation, taught us, okay, well, this didn't work well. And so vice versa, if we build a strong foundation for our kids, it's going to really help them grow into being, citizens in this country that can have and face racism. I think it's important to really understand, as the tip said, that our actions speaks louder than our words. As parents, it's the same way. If we provide a consequence for our kid for doing something and then we go do it ourselves, then our kids are going to pick up on that. They're going to pick up on our actions more than they will pick up on our words. And so we really do serve as a role model. Our actions need to match that. But to get to having that conversation, like Brennan said, and like Andre said, let's ask the direct question: how are you feeling? With recent situations after George Floyd's murder, it was, tell me what you think about this. Tell me how you feel. Getting at understanding what those emotions are, and not assuming that it's the same emotion that we're having. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but really trying to get to understand that emotion and what it is that they're feeling. And then trying to figure out what it is that they know. What is their world? What is their environment? What is it that they're seeing? Because again, I am not on the social media platform like my children are. And so I know that they are seeing so many more things than I have access to. So getting to them and asking them, what are the things that they're experiencing on their social media? What are the things that they know? What are their friends saying? What are their stories and videos that they're watching? And then we need to educate. We have to educate our children, and we need to be honest and truthful. Again, just piggybacking off of Brennan, I think as a parent, and this is a white perspective, and I say that full transparency. I think as a parent, many times we do want to shelter our children, because if we tell the truth, that truth led to, not our truth, but telling the truth meant that somebody got hurt, somebody was in pain. And sometimes telling that as a parent, we don't want our children to experience that pain and know that real pain and that real hurt exists. But we're at that point where kids, especially in this age, kids understand and know that there are other truths out there, and that we just have to be open and honest with them about the education, give them facts, give them information that's going to really help broaden their knowledge, so that can really solidify their own thoughts and feelings. And I think, again, for adolescents, we have to challenge their thinking. There's information coming out there at all times. if they express a thought, a feeling, a belief, and let's say, well, tell me about that. Why are you feeling that way? Or what do you think? Why do you think that? And I would encourage you, this is hard. Again, I'm a parent of some adolescents. This is hard because they usually will say, I don't know, or it is what it is kind of thing. And so just, try to stick with it and, kind of probe them a little bit more to go a little bit deeper. And I think challenging stereotypes at this age is a really important thing, particularly young adolescents, particularly children of color, are starting to likely experience individuals, putting those in those adult stereotypes. Certainly by high school, that has really existed. And so really trying to help our youth understand what are those stereotypes, why do they exist, what purpose do they serve, and understanding how those stereotypes can be harmful. Because then sometimes those stereotypes could be true. I'm not a great dancer. Not all white people are great dancers. Some are really good. I used to be better. And so some stereotypes can be true, but understanding that stereotypes really can be harmful and challenging our youth and understanding that. And again, for me, it is essential from a white person's perspective that I teach my children to understand their privilege. It's essential for them to understand that this exists, that there are privileges in this world that exist simply because of the color of their skin. They really have the ability to understand these different constructs and how they evolve and how they're impactful in the world. They're starting to understand that. And one of the most eye-opening experiences that I had one time was in a training, and we were just having dialogue between people of different races. And it had never even occurred to me that nobody had ever asked me as a white person, what do you think about this? Abby, what do you think all white people like? Abby, what do you think this? I have never been asked to represent my race, never. And that was such an eye-opening experience. And that was well into adulthood, that sunk in for me. And experiences like that and teaching that to our kids, because as a white person, we have the luxury of not having to face that. If I had not had that conversation, I don't know that I would have come to that myself, because it's never been forced upon me to think about it that way. So we have to, again, educate our kids and put them in those situations. We need to teach our kids to recognize racism. Again, like Brennan said, if we don't tell them that it's wrong, they will assume it's normal. And it for the most part, not always a given, but we really do need to help our youth to understand that, being treated unfairly, unjust, that is not normal. But we also need to help them that when they are in those situations, how they can handle it. And y'all are gonna have to excuse me for a minute, because this is the social work aspect of me coming out, but it's really important to understand that in youth, that their prefrontal cortex, which is that front part of their brain, which is responsible for decision making, which is responsible for complex thinking and problem solving and rationalization, that part of their brain is not fully developed into the early to sometimes even mid-20s. And so that ability in the moment to be responsive when they are experiencing racism or they are witnessing racism, that ability to be responsive in the moment is not a given, particularly for adolescents. That part of their brain is just not fully developed. And so we need to have those conversations. We need to give our kids the words. We need to practice with them when they are in scenarios, when they experience racism or they witness racism. How can they be responsive and not reactive? Reaction is not likely going to get us where we need to be. We need our kids to be responsive, which is a huge task to ask. Full disclosure, that's a huge task for even to ask an adult. But those are things that we really need to help our kids. And lastly, I would just say we need to talk about how we can help be allies and what we help our kids to understand what they can do within the systems that exist for them, whether that's school, whether that's church, whether that's their neighborhood, whether that's within their own family, how can they be an ally to somebody else? I talked a really long time, Andre, I'm sorry.
No, I enjoyed it. I hope everyone else did too. I appreciate your honesty. And just for full transparency, I can't dance either, and I'm Black. Lawrence, question for you. What are some constructive ways for our older kids, we're talking late teens, early 20s, to get involved in advocating for social justice and creating positive change?
But one of the ways is enjoy, joining the United Way and their community efforts that they have. Also getting involved with other community organizations that currently exist within the community. But one of the things is that we try to push towards young people, especially like myself, is information, self-care, amplification, community, and action. And those are our 5 pillars to have youth get more involved with social justice and advocacy work. That's not just consistent around racism, but also consistent around community. Because if you're out there in the community and you're experiencing those different cultures, such as doing litter pickups or volunteering with summer programs, and you are helping drive that conversation when you talk about racism, and when you have that opportunity to have those young people here, you can open up that discussion. Let's also know that young people, that racism is not just a Black and white thing. We also have our Hispanic communities as well too. And looking at them, especially as young Hispanic, because I'm Black and Hispanic, they also see another side to it as well. But their social justice and social fight is a little bit different than ours. And coming away with them, they can actually offer a deeper understanding in culture as well. So that's the way they can get involved, especially young Black kids and young Latino kids, is to get involved the way where telling their stories, getting on social media and changing how social media platform is used today, to actually talk about racism, to actually, instead of being a part of the hate, to actually stand against the hate online, start a movement. A lot of young kids are scared to do things because they think it takes a lot of money to do things. That's what stopped a lot of us from actually getting out to do this type of work. But it's just the fact that younger kids, they just need that free space and free mind. And it doesn't take money to get you there. The only thing that young kids need is they need to hear from our older generation to listen to, and just to give them a hand to guide. And then sometimes for young people, it's just as simple as asking. And I have learned that over the past couple of weeks. It's just as simple as asking, and making sure that our older folks understand that we look up to them, even when it doesn't seem like it, but we look up to them. And a lot of things that we do learn, and we do carry back into the community, is we get from our older folks. We get from our school teachers, like my school teacher, Amy Stembridge, who completely transformed her classroom from a all-student desk classroom into a cafe area, into a living room section, into a reading loft, and expanded our minds and took us outside the classrooms. And that brought an experience to me where now I can go to my local church, who has a community center with inside an education center inside of it, and give that same experience to the kids. So there's some of the stuff that we as young people can do, and to get involved, to actually bring change and to make our voices heard is simple. Get on social media and start a hashtag. So.
Thank you for sharing, man, and thank you for the work you're doing in the community. I'll confess to all of you, I've had butterflies in my stomach like all day today, just thinking about the weight of this conversation. And I think like some of that self-imposed pressure just stems from maybe a little what Abby said, like feeling like I need to represent my race in a way that can bring some kind of credit to this discussion and produce some words that, help people empathize with what racial discrimination does to kids. And I'll share my story. We were speaking here at United Way shortly after the aftermath of George Floyd being murdered. And we were just kind of sharing our feelings. And before I could get my first word out, I just found myself tearing up. And I wasn't sure where it was coming from. I was kind of shocked, to be honest with you, because it felt like I was taking it a little bit more personal than expected, and I couldn't identify like why was the emotion so intense. And I will say, growing up in like inner city hoods, like I just remember like when I was about 13 years old, like I had this idea of whether, you know, recognizing that because of my race, maybe because of the environment that I grew up in, maybe just basic cultural differences, that, you know, there were going to be restrictions on my opportunity for growth. So when you're trying to create ways that put you at more of an advantage and create opportunities that help you escape what seems to be like a recycling poor quality of life all around you, you're just trying to think, how do I conform myself to normal societal standards to where I feel like I can get some sort of approval. And I don't know, I convinced myself that if I was able to do so, whether it was through higher education, whether it was through career accomplishments, that maybe the world would start to make a little bit of room for me. And I would feel as if, you know, maybe I belong. And I can say, like, as I sit here as 40 years plus, I've exceeded my own expectations. But I think in that moment when I was conversing with, you know, coworkers, I felt like that 13-year-old kid again. And something inside of me was saying, you know, no matter, you know, what level of education you have, there is no level of accomplishment and no quality of success that will allow you to be worthy. And when I was 13 and hearing that message constantly, just because it felt like that's what the world was saying to you, like, you know, kid, I don't care what you do, you're never going to be enough, kid. Quit dreaming, quit dreaming, quit dreaming. And I think in that moment, I felt like a 13-year-old kid again, like I felt small. And I think that was the reason for the tears. So I think if we're all willing to admit to ourselves that we do care about what other people think about us, we just do. I think it's an inherent nature to desire love and to crave acceptance. I don't think I'm alone in that regard. But when the world doesn't feel like it's making room for you, it does feel suffocating. It just does. And it feels like there's nothing you can do to feel as if your life has equal value. For me personally, I will say I tried to overcome that just in the forms of self-love. Like, I've learned to say that, hey man, you are enough because you feel like you're enough. And it doesn't come from a place of arrogance. It really does. It just kind of breeds this natural empathy that I have, this natural compassion that I have that allows me to be a part of these conversations tonight in hopes of alleviating pain for kids that may be experiencing it for the first time, and just share that message that regardless of what the world is telling you, you are enough. Your life does matter. And no matter if you're actually feeling like you're neglected or the world feels like it's neglecting you, just know that your life is worth fighting for. Your value is worth fighting for. So I just wanted to share that. And to close out, I'll leave it open to you guys and ask the final question of what steps can we take in our everyday life to improve race relations in our communities. We have about 5.5 minutes left.
I'll start.
It's on you.
So one of the things that we can do in order to improve race relations in our own community is listening and understanding. Will we all fully understand each other? No, we won't all fully understand each other. But one of the things that we can do is have that open communication and conversation. And that's where it begins at. And it's not going to be, and the thing is that it's not going to take one panel discussion. It's not going to take one conversation with your mother and your father. This is going to be a thing that's going to happen daily. Even when you go to college, there's going to be questions that your young kids that just got in college are going to ask, especially young Black kids who go to majority white colleges and don't go to HBCUs. They're going to ask the question of, why do I feel different there? Just like the white kid that's in Morehouse and that's in Atlanta Clark also. They ask the same question of, I feel different here. But they don't get treated different when we open up conversations, because therefore we all have that moment to get out our passion. And then we all have that moment to steer the conversation and to find a solution within that conversation. A lot of times when we have conversations, we don't find solutions for our young people. We just have a conversation and hope that they get the conversation and carry the retaining with it. But not all kids process the same minds. Not all young people are going to process the same thing. So again, it's just a simple thing, listening and understanding and creating that conversation, and know that it is not a temporary thing. It is going to be a prolonged thing, and it's going to keep happening until we change it. And those conversations are going to change over the next generations of what I've been through, because I'm gonna tell my kids my story, the same way my grandfather told me his story. But each one of those stories impacted each of our lives down generation. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for my past experiences and sitting in the porches with those old Black women who was feeding us in the community, because they understood that it took a village to raise it, and they understood that it took a community to listen and to have a conversation. So
Thank you again, Lawrence. Abby, same question to you. What steps can we take in our everyday life to improve race relations in our communities?
Well, I have a lot of different thoughts about that. One of the things that I meant to mention before when we talking about how you talk to youth is Lawrence made this suggestion when we were having some discussions about planning for this, and that it doesn't always have to be a formal situation where you're sit down, hey son, come sit down beside me so we can have this talk. And so I think that that's an important component that we can, just the other day, I saw a post on Facebook, and I showed it to my daughter, and it led to us having a conversation, a much deeper conversation than if I would have just spontaneously, brought it up. And so, you can use, sometimes social media, especially for me, can be a little bit too much hate. But we can use that information and that to spark conversation, not only amongst our children, but with our family and our friends, and utilizing resources in our community for movies and cultural events, just music, exposing ourselves to that and having those conversations. And another thing I shared earlier that I sought out help from my friends and my colleagues. And there's some situations in my personal life where I'm not really sure how to proceed. And I'm seeking help from that. I'm seeking guidance and help from other people because I don't have the answers for it all. And I'll be transparent here. Professionally, I feel like I got this, within reason. But personally, having a conversation with another white person who is not on the same page with me is a challenging thing for me to think about, because when I speak to individuals of an opposite race or different race, I don't have to defend my actions. I don't have to defend my beliefs. We're all on the same page, right? Like, I'm not intimidated having this conversation with you guys because I know that we're all have the same goals, the same thoughts, the same heart. But that's not the case in other scenarios. And so that's an intimidating component for me. And I need to practice myself. I need to understand, and some guidance that was given to me is take small steps, Abby. You can't change, like Lawrence said, we're not going to change everything with one step, with one conversation. And so just starting, maybe where is a small thing where this individual might be willing to hear today? Maybe they're not willing to hear the full scope. Maybe I don't need to go into my big spiel, but I just need to say a couple of different things, and we'll continue to build upon that. So not having to do it all at one time, and recognizing let's use the resources out there. Let's use the social media. Let's use movies and our culture to help guide those conversations further.
Thank you again as well, Abby. Brendan, I'll leave the last word with you. Same question. What steps can we take in our everyday life to improve race relations in our communities?
I think one big thing we can do is to not invalidate the experiences of others. We don't necessarily have to validate them, but let's not invalidate those experiences. We've all gone through many different things. Personally, we've seen it, we've experienced certain things. And when we invalidate those things, it keeps people from talking about it. It keeps people from acknowledging that there are some challenges in our community. There are some racial challenges that we need to really address. But if we just pretend that it doesn't really exist, or they're exaggerating, or there's another problem, the cycle continues. And so that is one big step. I think another is really just not being afraid to talk about the things that you experienced or the things that you feel. And along with that, not just being comfortable talking about it with your family or your allies. Talk about it with folks who have a different opinion. And I know that's difficult for some, just with confrontation, or it could be something that's controversial. It could be something that creates a little conflict. But it also is something that's necessary. We've got to shake some things up a little bit. And if we continue to feel comfortable and we continue to accept things the way they are, and just say, that's just life and that's how people are, nothing's going to change. And so for me, I have to commit, and I have committed to addressing things when I see them, even when it feels like I have a whole lot more to lose when I open up my mouth. I've had to learn that I have a lot more to lose when I look at my children and I haven't opened my mouth. And so their lives now are going to be impacted by my silence. And so I've got to speak up and make sure that I can teach them how to make a difference in the world.
I'm so grateful you all decided to be a part of this conversation. I hope that we're able to at least spark some discussion in different households to make it easier for parents to talk to their kids about race. This community conversation does kick off our annual Youth and Resiliency training series here at United Way. Up next, I think we have a Juvenile Justice Jeopardy, which is an interactive game designed to help middle and high school age kids understand the law as it pertains to them and encourage positive interaction with their peers as well as law enforcement. You can visit uway.org for more information on the work that we're doing, including working directly with the schools to support young people and bring greater community awareness to the harmful effects of toxic stress in the lives of children. Thank you all again for agreeing to be a part of it. And thank you for everyone that tuned in. Hope to get a chance to see everybody again real soon. Everybody enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.